So pot stocks are hot right now. We saw Tilray go up 50%, another 15% after hours. So what's going on? Should you buy into the mania? Well, let's find out. It's your time. It's your dime. Let's make it count. So today we're going to start our two-part episode on investing in cannabis stocks. It's a lengthy topic, so we wanted to start today with the beginning of starting to invest in cannabis stocks. And then our next episode, we'll look at individual positions and give you our buy and sell recommendations. Why invest in cannabis? I've been consulting in the cannabis industry for about 8 years now, and I've been investing in it for about 5 years now. But it's one of the fastest growing industries in our economy. And why is that? Well, I equate it a lot to alcohol and prohibition. There's already been a market for cannabis, much like prohibition. People still want it, people still need it. Way back in the 20s, they weren't able to have it, so that shot the price up for people that had it in the black market, but people still kept consuming alcohol. A lot like cannabis, where we've had a pretty healthy black market way back from the 60s and 70s.
How do you feel?
Well, sir,
I feel like a slice of butter melting on top of a big old pile of flapjacks.
In California, we're at a 21-year medical market before adult use was legalized. And a lot of other states already have mature, established markets. So it's not like we're picking the greatest new thing, a new technology or something like that. It's already an industry that's established. So as the legal market grows and more states legalize either adult use or medical, then we're just investing in a market that's shifting from the black market or the back alleys to green market, clean market, or legal markets. So why would you invest in cannabis? There's already huge margins. We'll talk more about this in our next episode, but back in college 30 years ago, we paid $50 for an eighth of cannabis.
Say, man, you got a joint?
No, not on me, man.
It'd be a lot cooler if you did.
Today, you can walk into a dispensary and pay anywhere from $35 to $60 for an eighth ounce. It's still $50 an eighth. Well, there's incredible margins and there's incredible price resiliency, and people are used to paying that. But that works out to $6,500 a pound. Cultivators are able to grow that for $3, $4, $5, maybe $1,000 a pound in the highest, high electricity costs, high things like that. If you're growing indoors in Vegas and you're running air conditioning 8 or 10 months of the year, your costs per pound are going to be higher than growing outdoor up in Humboldt, where cannabis has been famous for 30 years, 40 years. Why invest in cannabis? Because it's an established industry, yet it's not. We couldn't invest in the illegal pot farm in Humboldt 20 years ago, nor would we want to. But now we can invest in legal cannabis. So it's a market that's established, but it's new to the investment world. So that's why we think you should invest in cannabis. But how do you invest in cannabis? That has had some issues over the last few years, mainly because the federal government still sees it as a class 1 drug. It's as bad as heroin. It's worse than cocaine and meth, which is ludicrous, especially given the state laws. This isn't a political show, as we've mentioned, but the current political climate would suggest that things are going to get easier for cannabis. And the last political environment, actually the last 3, all left it up to the states, which we love because the states have a little more common sense at times, especially when they see the tax revenue behind it for medical and then adult use cannabis. So how do you invest in it? Well, it's a little tricky. Back when I was a financial planner or licensed broker, there were very little things we could invest in. People would call me and say, hey, I want to put money into cannabis. 3 years ago, there were 5 stocks that I could pick because I could only, as a licensed advisor, recommend things that were traded on a national exchange. At the time, maybe 250 stocks were traded. 5 of them traded on the New York or the NASDAQ or American stock exchanges. The other 245 traded on the over-the-counter market or the pink sheets, what we used to call the penny stock market, which has a lot more problems. And then the rest were in Canada and other countries. Fortunately, that's changed. Over the last few years, more companies are now traded on national exchanges. And the companies that are trading even on the pink sheets are now more well-established companies. They've changed the level of pink sheet reporting. Back in the day when we used to buy penny stocks all the time, they only had to report their numbers once a year. Well, now there's 3 levels of over-the-counter trading where each level requires those companies to provide more details, more information about their business, which we want as investors. You would think they should have had that many years ago. Those things are changing. So how do we invest in cannabis? One is you have the option of buying some of the companies that are traded on the U.S. exchanges. Granted, most of those aren't still because it's still a federal crime to buy, sell, trade cannabis. So we still look to the pink sheets. So that's one piece. A lot of what we're seeing now are investments in SPACs or SPAC. They're special purpose asset companies. And they are basically taking a lot of investors into an entity that has the common goal of investing in these big cannabis companies. So they invest in the shell, get approved by the SEC, get approved by the states, get listed, get traded. And so they can go through all of those things with basically as a blank check company, which makes it a lot easier on the regulations because it's not, hey, we're buying Bob's pot farm. We're just putting money into this fund and then we're getting registered and traded. And then our investors can see where we're at. And then maybe someday we may still buy Bob's pot farm, but the regulators don't see that going in. So it's much easier to get through the registration process. So first step was why invest in cannabis. Second step is how to invest in cannabis. And then the third step is what to invest in. So that one is the question of the day, and we'll dive into that in a lot more detail in our second episode. But it's looking for things that you feel strongly about. So one is who's going to be the Marlboro of cannabis, where you can, 5 years from now or 10 years from now, we walk into a 7-Eleven and you buy a pack of joints. Somebody will have that. So do you want to invest in that? Or sometimes we equate it to the beer market, that they're the Coors Light or the Bud Light of the world. Do you want to invest in that? Or do you want the Sierra Nevada? Or do you want the high-end top shelf regional brews? Cannabis is going to have some of that. So you can invest in who you think will be the biggest provider across every state in the country. Here I'm in California. We're the biggest market in the world. America is now the biggest market, but California is the biggest market within America. We're much bigger than one of the first states to legalize, Washington, Oregon, and Canada all put together. I'm looking for investments in California. One, because I'm familiar with it. Two, because we have the history of it. So we have the Emerald Triangle. People know that California grows some of the best cannabis in the world. Obviously Amsterdam, I've traveled there a few times because of their cannabis. But California, I don't have to go to Amsterdam anymore because they have nothing on California anymore. So do you want to invest in the California market? Okay, let's say you do. Well, now what? Okay, there's cultivation, there's retail, there's manufacturing. So there's different pockets of the market that you can make more in, or it should grow over time faster than the other pockets. So we'll be talking about those specifically in our next episode as well. But I like the companies that are looking for full vertical integration. So they grow their own, they manage all the licensing, so they get it tested and processed, and then they either manufacture it into things that we'll talk about in a second, or they turn it into flower that people are most traditionally, when they say, hey, I want to buy an eighth of weed, hey, that's the top shelf flower that went through all these processes. And then on the manufacturing side, vape cartridges are very popular, edibles are very popular, extracts, where they can condense the THC and the terpenes of the cannabis down into wax, shatter, all these. There's 10 different names, or probably 50 different names that I don't know. Anyway, the extracts is a highly growing sub-industry within that. Edibles are probably the most popular right now. Vape cartridges were, year and a half ago, that was the fastest growing subsegment of the industry. And then we had the counterfeit or the black market vapes that killed a few people last year. And most of them were mixing it with vitamin E that when you heat it to the level that you need to turn it into vapor, it turns into cyanide, or a form of cyanide. Anyway, not to digress, gummies are actually the most popular subsegment of the cannabis industry right now. So if you think that's going to continue, and I think it could, a lot of people that I know that weren't fans of cannabis like gummies, and they use it for sleep or they use it for relaxing at the end of the day. As more and more people become aware of those things or how it may benefit their life, then they become new consumers. So if you want to make a bet on who's making the best gummies, that's a good investment decision, I believe. One, because we know the industry is growing. Two, we know that subsector is growing. And then three, if you can find the company that's within that sector that's going to someday have the gummy on the shelf, behind the counter at 7-Eleven, then that would be a good investment. So we're looking at, one was why invest and how to invest, but then what to invest in. I would steer clear of a lot of these companies that started 4, 5, 6 years ago with a business plan that had delusions of grandeur, that they think that they're going to be the one that puts that gummy in the market of every 7-Eleven, yet they still haven't manufactured their own gummy. Big thing today was Tilray. They're a big Canadian company, and they're merging with Apria, and they signed a deal to provide medical cannabis in the UK. Well, their stock shot up billions of dollars. They were up 51% in today's trading and another 14% after hours, up to $10 billion company because they signed a deal in maybe a $100 million market. Medical cannabis in the UK is a tiny sliver of the market. So in full disclosure, I actually bought put options against them today, more as a bet with a friend of mine. I couldn't believe the valuation. But when you're looking at investing in this sector, as we've talked about in other episodes, and we'll talk about in future episodes, you have the momentum play or the value play or the fundamentals. I'm not a big momentum guy. It doesn't make sense to me. My math brain doesn't work that way. I need to see companies that have a solid idea, even if they're not making money yet. They have a way to enter the market. They have a way to get to profitability in a relatively short time, or at least in the time that I'm willing to hold them. Tilray hasn't ever made a profit. And now they're a $10 billion company simply because they started in Canada where it was easier to get listed as a Canadian stock company. And they're one of the top, one of the highest valued cannabis companies at a default because US companies can't get traded yet, other than a few exceptions. So anyway, that's one that I would stay away from. But when we're investing, I like to invest in things that we like or that you like and things that are easy to follow. So there's ways to invest in the cannabis market that isn't even tied to THC. Most people are familiar with CBD, which is another component of the cannabis plant that doesn't get you high. But there are a lot of health benefits and more that we're learning about. And the first one that got approved by the FDA was for helping people with epilepsy. But I know a lot of people that take CBD. My wife takes CBD and she doesn't like THC, but CBD helps relax her and helps her sleep better. We've had a couple issues with our pets, and pet CBD is another growing sector. So there's ways that you can invest in this sector and benefit from all the properties of the plant that aren't tied to THC or tied to the dispensary around the corner or the grow site around the corner. So that's another subsector. People are moving into beverages. So they're coming out with CBD beverages. They also have THC beverages that combine with beer. So if that's something that you think will be a hot item in the years to come, then do your homework and pick the best of the best in those sectors and invest in those. So there's even high-tech areas of the cannabis industry. Take nanotech, for example. They're extracting the particles of the cannabis flower and really diving down on those particles and then infusing them into food or beverages. So a lot of neat things happening in the cannabis world. So one of my favorite resources is marijuanaindex.com. That lists all of the publicly traded companies in the marijuana index. And then you can sort on those. So you can sort by market cap. So I always look at who are the biggest, and then you can click it again and see who are the smallest. Daily gains, I like to click it and see who's up the most today, and then sometimes who's down the most today. And if you're looking at value plays, why are they down? Maybe it was a short-term trading thing. Maybe there's something to buy tomorrow. Then our next episode, we're going to talk about the stocks that we own in our portfolio, the stocks that we're looking at buying, and then the stocks that we're looking at selling in the marijuana index. So that's one example of ways to make money. A second one is also looking at private companies or through these SPACs, companies that are raising funds to get ready to go public. And so I invest in a few privately traded cannabis companies. And those are available, and we'll provide you resources mainly through these funds or these special purpose entities that are saying, hey, let's raise a bunch of money and go buy a bunch of farms. We've come across companies now that are pre-buying flower as much as 15, 16, one the other day, $1,700 a pound. So the growers know before they even grow their first flower, they can grow it maybe for $200, $300, $400 a pound. And before it's even grown, they can sell it for $1,700 a pound. Investing in a company like that, as long as they can keep growing it for 2, 3, 4, 500 and keep selling it for 14, 15, 16, 17, the math makes sense. So there's lots of ways to invest in the cannabis industry. We hopefully through this episode, you've got some good ideas, and we look forward to having you join us on our next episode, where we'll be talking about individual positions that we're buying, individual positions that we're thinking about buying. And in the meantime, please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.